The crack of a gunshot ripped across the empty Montana plains in 1872, making Ruby Quinn jolt as she wrestled with the busted wheel of her stagecoach. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The bullet hit the dirt so close it sprayed her boot with pebbles. She spun honey blonde hair falling loose from its braid and leveled her father's Remington with both hands steady. "Don't take another step, unless you're ready to lose that hat," she called, her voice sharp against the wide-open silence. A rider slowed his chestnut stallion, the setting sun stretching his shadow long across the trail. He lifted his hands halfway in mock surrender. "Ma'am, if you truly meant to shoot, I reckon you'd have done it already." His tone carried a trace of humor that made Ruby bristle. "Don't test me, stranger. I've had enough trouble for one day." Her revolver stayed fixed on his chest. He was tall, broad, through the shoulders, face cut by wind and sun, yet striking with dark hair beneath a battered Stetson. His green eyes held equal parts caution and curiosity. "Name's Colter Hayes. Folks just call me Colter. Looks like you could use some help with that wheel. Ruby Quinn?" She answered stiffly, lowering her gun a fraction, but not holstering it. "And I'll manage." Colter slid from the saddle with the easy grace of a man born in it. "No offense, miss, but that wheel needs more than managing." He moved slow hands visible as he neared the coach. "You travelin' alone?" he asked. Ruby lifted her chin. "My affairs are my own, Mr. Hayes." He smiled, then softening his rough features. "Fair enough. Still night's coming, and this stretch of land isn't kind after sundown." Ruby hesitated. She'd left Denver 3 days earlier, bound for Silver Creek and a schoolteacher's post. The driver and passengers had abandoned her at the last stop, refusing to ride on with bandit rumors in the air. Now she was stranded miles from town. "I can fix that wheel," Colter offered, nodding toward his saddlebags. "Got the tools for it." At last, Ruby slid the revolver back into its holster. "Very well, Mr. Hayes. I'll accept." She kept a wary distance while he worked her thoughts guarded. Too often kindness had been mistaken for weakness, and she had no wish to appear defenseless. "You bound for Silver Creek?" he asked, breaking the quiet. Her eyes narrowed. "How would you know?" "Only place worth heading in this direction." He grunted, tightening a bolt. "What's got you traveling to that dust-choked town? I'm the new schoolteacher?" Ruby answered, a spark of pride in her voice. He looked up, surprised. "Schoolteacher Silver Creek's been trying to land one for over a year. Well, now they've got one." Colter dusted off his hands on worn denim and studied her. "Beg pardon, but you don't strike me as the usual schoolmarm." "And what's that supposed to mean?" Ruby snapped. He chuckled, warm and low. "Most don't greet strangers with a Remington, let alone know how to aim it. I'm not like other women," Ruby said, plain and firm. His gaze held hers, something unspoken stirring there. "That's exactly why I want to see you safe. Silver Creek's a day's ride yet, and night's falling. My ranch is over that ridge. You can rest there and push on tomorrow." Ruby hesitated, instincts battling necessity. "How do I know I can trust you?" "You don't," Colter admitted. "But you have my word you'll be safe. My housekeeper Cora Bell will be there to keep everything proper." His voice carried sincerity, and the lengthening shadows pressed her decision. "Very well, Mr. Hayes. Lead on." The Hayes Ranch rose grander than Ruby expected, a 2-story home against the mountain's corrals full of horses' outbuildings, neat and tended. "You've done well," Ruby remarked as Colter helped her down. "My father built it." "I've just tried not to ruin it," he answered modestly. The door opened, revealing a stout, gray-haired woman whose stern look softened at Colter's sight. Cora Bell. "We've got a company," he announced. "Miss Ruby Quinn, the new teacher, ran into trouble on the road." Cora Bell's sharp eyes swept Ruby. Then she stepped aside. Come in, child. Supper's near ready, and you look like you could use a plate. The warm kitchen smelled of fresh bread and roasting meat, and for the first time in days, Ruby felt her guard ease. Later, after a hot bath and a meal that filled her belly, she sat in the parlor, damp hair loose. Colter came in with 2 steaming cups of coffee, handing one to her before sitting across the room. "Cora's set the guest room for you," he said. "Thank you," Ruby replied softly. "Your hospitality means more than you know." "What brings a woman like you all the way out here?" he asked, pausing for her answer. "Boston first," she said after a sip. "Denver most recently. I wanted something different, a place where I could make a difference." Colter's smile was faint. "Silver Creek's about as far from Boston as a body can get. The children there, they need someone who believes in them. Teachers before you didn't last long." Ruby frowned, her resolve hardening. Colter's face grew somber. "Silver Creek's no easy place, Miss Quinn. You'll find ranch hands, miners, and a few families just trying to scratch out a life. The children come from all walks, many barely know their letters. That's exactly why they need a steady teacher," Ruby replied firmly. "Every child deserves to learn no matter the circumstances." He studied her for a long while, green eyes thoughtful. "You're not what I pictured when I heard the town finally landed a schoolteacher. Life is full of surprises, Mr. Hayes." She set her empty cup aside and rose. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need rest. Tomorrow's bound to be long." Colter stood ever the gentleman. "I'll see you safely into Silver Creek at first light." "That won't be necessary," Ruby answered at the doorway. "Maybe not," he said with a faint grin. "But I'd feel better knowing you arrived in one piece." Something in his voice made her pause, studying him closer. "You've got business in Silver Creek?" she asked. "I do now," he said simply. Her heartbeat picked up at that, though she masked it with a brisk nod. "Good night, Mr. Hayes." Morning broke bright and warm. Ruby dressed in a plain navy skirt, a crisp white blouse, and pinned her hair neatly. When she descended the stairs, Colter was already waiting, hat in hand. "Cora Bell packed food for the ride," he said. "Your coach is ready." They set out. As the sun climbed over the ridges, Ruby's stagecoach, trailing Colter's horse along the dusty trail, the country unfurled before them, rolling hills tumbling into steep cliffs, prairie grasses sprinkled with wild flowers like spilled paint. "It's beautiful," Ruby murmured during a pause to rest the horses. Colter glanced at her, his expression softening. "Most folks only see how harsh it is. Takes a different eye to see the beauty. Maybe you just need to look past the obvious," she suggested. "Maybe so," he agreed, his gaze lingering on her longer than courtesy allowed. They rode on conversation easy now. Ruby spoke of teaching back in Boston and Denver, while Colter shared the burdens and pride of ranching in Montana. "My father always said this land's got a soul," he told her, as they topped a hill, revealing a wide valley. "Said it'll provide for those who respect it." "And has it provided for you?" Ruby asked. Colter considered. "It's given me a good life, but a lonely one." His eyes caught hers. "Sometimes I wonder what I'm missing." Before she could answer, hoofbeats thundered in the distance. Colter's hand went to his revolver. Inside now, he barked. "Stay low!" Ruby ducked into the coach, peering through the window, as 3 riders closed in, grimy, unshaven, the kind who lived outside the law. Hayes, the leader, called, reining up a few yards away. "Didn't expect to see you out here." Silas Holt Colter replied coldly. "You're far from your usual haunts." Silas smirked. "Word was traffic on this trail might be worth our time." "Looks like the rumor was right." His eyes shifted toward the coach. "Who's your passenger?" "None of your concern," Colter answered evenly. "We're just passing through. Everything out here's my concern," Silas drawled, his hand drifting toward his gun. especially when it involves a pretty lady in a coach. Ruby's heart pounded, but she refused to shrink back. She pushed the door open and stepped out, her Remington hidden in her skirts. Miss Quinn Colter began, alarmed. "It's all right, Mr. Hayes," she said calmly, facing the outlaws. "Gentlemen, I'm the new school teacher in Silver Creek. I assure you I carry nothing of value." Silas barked a laugh, sharp and humorless. "A school teacher out here? That's either brave or foolish." His gaze raked over her. "I've been called both," Ruby said evenly. "Now, if you don't mind, we've got a schedule to keep." For a moment, tension hung thick. Then Silas tipped his hat, mockingly. "Education's important, least, that's what my ma used to say. Welcome to Montana Territory, schoolmarm. Let's hope you last longer than the last one." He signaled his men, and the riders wheeled away, dust rising in their wake. Colter was beside her in an instant. "That was the bravest or most reckless thing I've ever seen." Ruby let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Sometimes confidence is the best shield, and sometimes it gets you killed," he shot back, voice taut with worry. "Silas Holt isn't a man to toy with. This time you were lucky." He helped her back into the coach, his hand lingering on her arm. "Promise me you'll be more careful in Silver Creek. Not everyone will admire your courage." "You're worried about me," she observed. "I worry for anyone who crosses Silas without knowing the danger," Colter replied, though his eyes betrayed something more. By mid-afternoon, Silver Creek came into sight, nestled in the valley. Larger than Ruby expected, its main street brimmed with shops, side roads lined with homes, and a white church steeple rising above it all. Colter guided the coach to a 2-story building with a freshly painted sign, Silver Creek School. "The schoolhouse," he explained, helping her down with living quarters above. "The council fixed it up when they heard you were coming." Ruby looked at the bright windows and the welcoming porch. "It's perfect." A small crowd had gathered, eager to get a look at the newcomer. From the front stepped a round-bellied man in a fine coat, hand outstretched. "Miss Quinn, welcome to Silver Creek. I'm Harlan Pike, and mighty glad you made it here safe." Ruby shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mayor. I'm ready to get started." As the introductions went on, she caught sight of Colter Hayes standing a little off to the side, watching everything with that unreadable expression of his. When Harlan Pike finally led her inside to see the schoolhouse and quarters above, Colter stayed behind. The tour didn't take long, but it gave her heart a lift. The classroom was wide and bright, lined with desks, a blackboard, and shelves already waiting for books. Her living space upstairs was plain but comfortable. A bed, a small sitting room, and a corner kitchen. "Classes begin next Monday," Pike explained. "You've got the week to settle in. June Bell at the store's already set aside some supplies for you, courtesy of the council." "That's very kind," Ruby answered, touched by the thought. When she stepped back outside, Colter was still there, speaking low to a young deputy, Jed Creed. He straightened the moment Ruby approached. "Everything to your liking." "Very much so," she said. "Thank you for seeing me here, Mr. Hayes." "I owe you." Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe, but he only dipped his head. "No debt, Miss Quinn. Just what any man ought to do." Harlan Pike cleared his throat. "Colter's too modest. He's the one who pressed us to fix this place upright. Said if we were serious about a teacher, we had to prove it." Ruby's surprise must have shown because Colter looked almost sheepish. "Education matters," he said simply. "Well," Pike went on, oblivious to the quiet spark between them. "We'll let you get settled. Supper at the hotel's dining room is at 6 if you'd like to join." After the mayor left, Ruby and Colter stood awkwardly in the street. "Will you be staying in town?" she asked at last. "I've got business," he answered vaguely. "My ranch isn't far. I ride into Silver Creek often." Ruby gave a short nod, though something inside her sank. "Thank you again, Mr. Hayes." He touched the brim of his hat. "My pleasure, Miss Quinn." He paused, then added, "Silver Creek has its share of hardships, but the people here are good. Give them the chance and they'll surprise you." With that, he swung onto his horse and rode off, leaving Ruby to wonder about the enigmatic cowboy who'd come to her aid. The next few days passed in a whirl as she prepared for her first lessons. She met townsfolk, memorized the names of her students from the school ledger, and laid out her curriculum. Folks were kind, if a bit reserved, still weighing her up. Sunday evening, as Ruby reviewed her notes one last time, a knock startled her. Opening the door, she found Colter on the step, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically uneasy. "Mr. Hayes," she said, surprise plain in her voice. "I didn't expect you." "Forgive the late call," he said. "I was in town and thought you might like these." He held out a small bouquet of wildflowers. "For your desk tomorrow. Tradition says a teacher should have flowers on her first day." Ruby accepted the bundle, touched by the gesture. "Is that a Montana tradition? Or a Hayes tradition?" He smiled faintly. Maybe a little of both. His eyes strayed to her table, scattered with papers. "Getting ready for battle, something like that," she admitted, stepping back. "Would you like to come in? I could use a local's insight." Colter hesitated, then crossed the threshold. His tall frame seemed to fill the small space, but his eyes took in the details. She'd added a quilt from home, cherished books on the mantel. "You've settled in well?" he said. "It's beginning to feel like home," Ruby replied, setting the flowers in water. "Still, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous." "The children will take to you," he answered with unexpected certainty. She arched a brow. "You sound awfully sure of that." "I know these families," Colter said, settling into a chair. "Their children are just like them, hard-working, plain-spoken, suspicious of outsiders. But once you earn their trust, it's yours for life." "And how does one earn it?" Ruby asked. "By being real," he said after a pause. "They can smell a false front a mile away. I have no intention of being anything but myself," she said firmly. "That's why you'll succeed where others failed," he told her. They talked for more than an hour, Colter sharing which families struggled, which valued learning, which children might need an extra hand. Ruby was struck by his depth of knowledge, his care for the people of this valley. "You're more than just a rancher," she observed, as he rose to leave. He paused at the door. "What makes you say that?" "The way you speak of these folks, it's personal." He studied her a long moment before answering. "My family's been here 3 generations. Their hardships, their triumphs, they matter to me." "That's admirable," Ruby said softly. "Not admirable," he countered, setting his hat on his head. "Just the way it ought to be." He tipped the brim. "Good luck tomorrow, Miss Quinn. I've got a feeling you'll change things around here." After Colter left, Ruby found her thoughts lingering on their talk far longer than she cared to admit. The first day of school broke under a bright Montana sky. Ruby dressed with care. Forest green skirt, cream blouse, hair pinned in a tidy coronet. On her desk sat the wildflowers Colter had given her, their colors bringing a gentle warmth to the room. By 8 o'clock, children trickled in, some wide-eyed, some dragging their feet, all curious about the new teacher. Ruby greeted each by name, having committed the register to memory. That small effort earned her nods from parents and startled respect from the youngsters. By the half-hour mark, 27 students filled the benches, from little ones of 6 to gangly ranch boys of 16. Ruby looked over them, took a steadying breath, and spoke. "Good morning. My name is Miss Quinn, and I am honored to be your teacher." She wrote her name firmly across the blackboard. "In this room we will learn together, work together, and respect one another. I expect much from each of you, no matter your age or station." A 14-year-old boy lifted his hand. "Miss Quinn, the last teacher said girls don't need arithmetic beyond adding and subtracting. Is that true? Several girls ducked their heads, accustomed to such rules. Ruby's gaze sharpened, though her voice stayed calm. No, it isn't true. In this classroom, every student will learn every subject I have to offer. Mathematics, history, literature, science. Knowledge has no gender. The boy blinked, surprised, while one of the older girls straightened in her seat, hope sparking in her eyes. Now then, Ruby went on, I'd like to see where each of you stand. We'll begin with reading. The day flew by. As she expected, skills ranged wildly. Many of the older boys had missed lessons while working ranch or mine. By the final bell, Ruby knew the mountains she faced, but also the strength in her class. At dismissal, the boy who had spoken earlier lingered. Miss Quinn, I'm Tommy Lee. My pa runs the general store. Yes, Tommy, I've met your mother. She's been very kind. He shifted awkward. I just wanted to say, I liked what you said about girls learning. My sister Josie May, he nodded toward a serious-faced 12-year-old by the door, she's sharper than me, but the last teacher wouldn't let her try the harder problems. Ruby smiled warmly. Thank you, Tommy. I believe everyone deserves a fair chance to learn all they can. When the children had gone, she began sorting notes for tomorrow, so focused she didn't notice the figure in the doorway until a shadow fell across her desk. Looking up, she found Colter leaning against the frame, amusement tugging at his mouth. Mr. Hayes, she said, setting down her pen. Were you spying on my class? Observing, he corrected lightly. From a respectable distance. And what did you observe? She asked, curiosity pricking despite herself. A natural teacher. Tommy Lee never stays late yet, there he was talking to you like it mattered. A blush rose to her cheeks. Children respond to respect. Some adults could stand to learn that lesson. Colter straightened, stepping closer. I came to invite you to supper at the hotel to mark your first day. Ruby hesitated. Would that be proper? It's a public dining room, he reminded her. And half the council will be there, eager to hear how you fared. Put that way, it seemed harmless. Very well. I'll need a moment to freshen up. I'll wait outside. Dinner at the Silver Creek Hotel proved a town gathering. Harlan Pike and several councilmen joined firing questions about her impressions. Ruby answered with measured thought, outlining her ideas. The older boys need practical mathematics, surveying, bookkeeping, while keeping up their other studies. And I'd like to begin a lending library for the whole town, not just the school. Ambitious Harlan Pike remarked, impressed. Necessary Colter countered, surprising Ruby with his easy support. If Silver Creek wants a future, we need educated folks. Talk turned to water rights roads and the coming Harvest Festival. Ruby studied Colter across the table, how his voice carried weight, how the others listened. He wasn't just another rancher. He was tied into the marrow of this place. When dinner ended, Colter offered his arm. The walk back to the schoolhouse was quiet. The main street bathed in moonlight stars crowding the sky. Thank you for your support tonight, Ruby said softly. I only spoke truth, he replied. This town needs someone with vision, someone willing to fight for it. That's you. She laughed lightly. You make me sound formidable. Aren't you? Colter stopped facing her. His expression in the silver light was earnest. You left everything behind to come here alone. You stared down Silas Holt without blinking. And this morning you overturned years of narrow thinking in a single breath. Ruby faltered, unsure how to answer such blunt words. I only do what I believe is right. That's what sets you apart, he said softly. Most folks settle for what's easy. They had reached the schoolhouse steps. Ruby turned to say goodnight, but realized he was standing closer than she thought. The air between them felt alive, charged with things unspoken. Colter finally stepped back, tipping his hat. Good night, Miss Quinn. I'll be eager to hear more about this revolution of yours in the classroom. Good night, Mr. Hayes. Ruby answered her voice steadier than the pulse racing in her chest. And thank you again for the flowers." They brightened the room. He walked off into the night, leaving Ruby restless with thoughts she couldn't quite name. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Ruby poured herself into the work, slowly winning over even the most skeptical students with her blend of fairness and firmness. Before long, she began hosting evening classes twice a week for grown men and women eager to brush up on reading or sums. Much to her surprise, those lessons quickly filled with ranch hands minors and even a few of the town's older women. Colter showed up in Silver Creek often, sometimes stopping by the schoolhouse after hours with books to add to her lending library, other times sharing news from the far reaches of the valley. Their talks stretched from lessons and politics to childhood stories, each conversation pulling Ruby deeper toward the rancher, whose quiet devotion to his people seemed boundless. One warm Friday in late September, as Ruby dismissed her students for the weekend, she noticed Colter waiting not on horseback this time, but beside a wagon. "Mr. Hayes," she greeted, aware of the curious eyes of children filing past. "This is unexpected." "Miss Quinn," he replied with a polite formality, though the warmth in his eyes betrayed it. "I've a proposition for you." Ruby arched a brow. "That sounds interesting. Tomorrow's the Harvest Festival," he reminded her. "I thought you might like to see more of the valley before then. There's a lake near my ranch with a view that's worth the trip." Ruby hesitated. Such an outing would set tongues wagging. "Just the two of us?" Colter assured. Cora Bell packed a basket. "We'd be back before sundown." Perhaps it was the golden light of autumn, or the thought of the festival beginning, but Ruby found herself agreeing. The ride to Colter's ranch was filled with easy chatter about her pupils and the coming celebration. When they passed the big house and turned toward the mountains, Ruby grew curious. "How much farther is this grand view?" she asked. "Just over the ridge," he promised. "Trust me, it's worth it." He was right. Cresting the hill, Ruby gasped as a clear lake spread before them, mirroring the peaks and sky above. Wildflowers still clung to the shore, and eagles wheeled high overhead. "It's breathtaking," she murmured as Colter helped her down. "My grandfather found it when he first came west," Colter explained, lifting the basket from the wagon. "Called it Heaven's Mirror. Family legend says he asked my grandmother to marry him right there on that rock." He pointed toward a flat boulder by the water's edge. They spread a blanket by the shore, and Cora Bell's basket revealed a feast-fried chicken, fresh bread, apple tarts, and a bottle of wine. "This is lovely," Ruby said after they'd eaten, leaning back to take in the scene. "Thank you for sharing it." Colter's eyes rested on her, steady and thoughtful. "You've changed Silver Creek in just a few weeks. Folks are different because of you." Ruby blinked. "Surely you exaggerate." "I don't," he said firmly. "Josie May's talking about becoming a doctor now. Old Buck Mason can finally read his own newspaper, and the Sandoval children who barely knew a word of English when you arrived are reciting poems." Heat rose in Ruby's cheeks. They just needed someone to believe in them. Colter's voice softened. "That's what sets you apart. Other women came through and saw a rough town to be tamed. You see people with promise." Their eyes met Ruby's pulse quickening. "You give me too much credit," she whispered. "I don't think that's possible," Colter murmured, his gaze dipping toward her lips before he caught himself. Clearing his throat, he rose and held out a hand. "Care for a walk along the shore? Sometimes the trout jump near the rocks." Ruby accepted, and he didn't let go right away once she stood. They strolled in silence, hands brushing each touch, both accidental and intentional. "May I ask you something personal?" Ruby ventured. "Of course. Why aren't you married? You're respected, established. I imagine you've had offers." Colter grew quiet so long that Ruby worried she had overstepped. At last he spoke, voice low, with a trace of pain. I was engaged once 5 years back. Abigail Rose. She came from Philadelphia. Her father had investments in the mines out here. His eyes clouded. She liked the idea of being a rancher's wife more than the reality. When the first hard winter came, the cold, the loneliness she left on the next stage east. Ruby's heart softened. I'm sorry. Colter shrugged, but the gesture didn't hide the wound. It was for the best. We'd have made each other miserable. He glanced at her. And you, no suitors back in Boston or Denver? Ruby smiled faintly. I was considered too outspoken for most men. My father, Ezekiel Boone, was a professor. He raised me to believe women deserved the same education as men, much to my mother, Martha Jo's, dismay. Colter nodded slowly. Your father sounds like a wise man. Ruby's voice softened, a shadow crossing her features. He was, but my father, Ezekiel Boone, passed last year. After that, I knew I had to make a change to find a place where I could use what he taught me to make a difference. They had wandered into a quiet cove where the water curled gently against a sandy bank. Colter stopped and turned to face her squarely. Ruby, he said, using her first name. For the first time, your father would be proud of what you're doing here. The sincerity in his tone, paired with the intimacy of her name, stole her breath. Thank you, Colter. Something shifted between them, some line crossed that neither cared to retreat from. He stepped closer, lifting a hand to brush her cheek. I've wanted to do this since the day we met on that road, he confessed, voice low. Ruby knew she ought to step back to remember the propriety of a schoolteacher in a frontier town. Instead, she leaned into his touch. What stopped you? She whispered. Fear you'd shoot me, he answered with a wry smile that only half hid his seriousness. I still might, she murmured, her eyes falling to his lips. The kiss came tentative at first, a question more than a claim. Ruby answered with her hands slipping to his shoulders, pulling him near. Colter's arms wrapped around her waist, and the kiss deepened until Ruby forgot every lesson in caution she had ever been taught. When at last they parted breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. I ought to apologize, he murmured. Don't you dare, Ruby said, fiercer than she expected. The words drew a rare laugh from him. Ruby Quinn, you continue to surprise me, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But we best head back before the town sends out a search party. The ride home was laced with stolen glances and touches that were anything but accidental. Neither spoke of what had happened by heaven's mirror, but both knew nothing between them would be the same. As they neared Silver Creek, the peaceful mood shattered. The main street churned with people moving in hurried knots, tension etched on every face. Colter snapped the reins, urging the team faster. They pulled up at the hotel where Harlan Pike stood deep in talk with Marshal Tate and a cluster of townsmen. The mayor's face lifted in relief as they arrived. Colter, Miss Quinn, thank the Lord. We were near to sending riders after you. What's happened? Colter demanded, helping Ruby down. Marshal Tate stepped forward, jaw tight. Silas Holt and his gang hit Buck Mason's store an hour ago. Took the cash box and a load of supplies. Ruby gasped. Was anyone hurt? Buck tried to stop him. Took a pistol whip to the head, the marshal said grimly. Doc Hanley's with him now. He'll live. But it was close. The children. Ruby asked, her mind racing to Tommy Lee and Josie May. They're shaken but safe, Harlan Pike assured her. June Bell had them in the back. Colter's expression hardened like steel. Which way did they ride? North, Tate answered. Toward the old mining camp. We're raising a posse at first light. I'm riding with you, Colter said flatly. There was no room for argument in his tone. Ruby touched his arm. Colter, be careful. Silas Holt is dangerous. He laid his hand over hers, forgetting for a moment the eyes watching them. I will. You check on the Mason children, they'll need you." Ruby nodded, aware of the curious looks their exchange had drawn. "I'll go now." The Mason home stood behind the store, modest and neat. June Bell opened the door with relief plain on her face. "Miss Quinn, thank heavens. The children have been asking for you." Inside, Tommy Lee and Josie May sat pale and shaken at the kitchen table. Their eyes lit a little when Ruby entered. "Is Pa going to be all right, Josie?" May blurted. Ruby took their hands. "Doc Hanley is with him, and everyone says he'll recover. Your father is brave." Tommy Lee nodded, his jaw set like a grown man's. They barged in demanding money. Pa tried to talk sense to them, but Silas just laughed and smashed him with his gun. "I was so scared," Josie May whispered, tears spilling. "I wanted to help, but Ma pulled us into the storeroom." "Your mother did exactly right," Ruby told her gently. "The most important thing is that you're safe." She stayed through the evening, helping June Bell with supper and distracting the children with stories and games, until Doc Hanley brought word Buck Mason was awake and asking for his family. "You should go to him," Ruby urged June Bell. "I'll sit with the children till you return." Later, after evening chores and settling the little ones to bed, Ruby sat alone in the kitchen. Her thoughts tangled. The sweet memory of Colter's kiss at the lake still warmed her, yet worry gnawed sharper. Silas Holt had already shown his cruelty. Facing him again would be perilous. A soft knock rattled the back door. Ruby started, then opened it to find Colter standing there, his face grave. "How are they?" he asked quietly, stepping inside. "Shaken but strong." Ruby answered. "June Bell's with Buck at Doc Hanley's. The children are asleep." Colter removed his hat, his voice heavy. "The posse rides at dawn. I needed to see you first." The plain honesty of his words struck through Ruby. "Is that wise?" "The marshal can't track worth a damn," Colter said bluntly. "And Silas knows these mountains better than most. They'll need me." Ruby wanted to argue, to beg him to stay safe in town, but she knew it would be no use. Instead, Ruby stepped closer, laying her hand against his chest. "Then you must promise me you'll come back safe." Colter covered her hand with his own. "I promise to try my damnedest." The rough word pulled a startled laugh from her. "Colter Hayes. That's hardly proper." "Neither is this," he murmured, and kissed her with a fierceness that left no question of his feelings. When at last they parted, Ruby clung to him. "Please, be careful." Always he vowed, though stepping back from her clearly pained him. "Hold things together here. If we're gone more than a day or two, this town will need your strength." After he left, sleep was a stranger to Ruby. Her mind raced with visions of Colter riding into danger, of the shattered peace of Silver Creek, of June. Belle and her children trying to find safety again. Morning brought no rest. At dawn, 12 men gathered on the edge of town, Colter among them, Marshal Tate at his side, with young Jed Creed checking his rifle nervously. Ruby, having hurried back to the schoolhouse to change, watched from her window as the posse rode out. Colter's tall frame was easy to spot in the saddle. The next 3 days dragged like years. She kept teaching, knowing the children needed routine, but her heart wandered constantly to the men chasing Silas Holt into the hills. Every evening she found herself at the edge of town, staring at the horizon, praying for riders. On the 4th day, as Ruby dismissed her class shouts, rose from the street. She rushed outside. The posse was coming home, dusty, slow-moving, with a wagon trailing behind, carrying wounded men. At the front, Colter rode tall and unbroken. Relief nearly knocked her to her knees. Marshal Tate's voice carried over the noise, explaining. They'd caught 3 of Silas's men and recovered most of the goods, but Silas himself had slipped into the mountains after a vicious gunfight. Colter swung down from his horse, handing the reins to a stable boy, his eyes locking onto Ruby at once. The look of relief there matched her own. He made his way through the press of townsfolk straight to her side. "You're not hurt?" she asked softly, resisting the urge to reach for him. "Scrapes and bruises," he admitted. "Nothing worth fretting over." And Silas Ruby pressed. His jaw tightened. "Got away for now. We found their camp, but they were ready. 2 of our men went down in the first volley." Ruby glanced toward the wagon where Doc Hanley was already working. "Will they pull through?" "Doc thinks so. We were lucky it could have been worse." As the prisoners were marched to the jail and the injured taken to Doc Hanley's office, the crowd thinned, leaving Colter at Ruby's side, unwilling to leave her. "Walk with me," he asked quietly, nodding toward the road that led to the schoolhouse. When they were out of sight, Colter took her hand, his grip steady and sure. "I thought about you every minute out there," he said simply. "And about that afternoon at Heaven's Mirror." Ruby squeezed his hand. "As did I. I was so afraid for you, Colter." They stopped at the schoolhouse steps. His expression grew solemn. "Ruby, I know this is sudden, and maybe improper, given the short time we've known each other, but these days made something clear to me." Her heart raced. "What's that life here is uncertain. It forces a man to weigh what matters." He held both her hands in his. "You matter. More than I knew a person could in so little time." "Colter," she began, overwhelmed. "Let me finish," he urged. "I'm not asking for promises, not yet. Just the chance to court you proper. To see if what I feel, what I hope you feel too, can grow into something lasting." Ruby's composure wavered. Since her arrival, she had focused only on her teaching, never daring to imagine something personal. Yet here stood this man, steady, thoughtful, brave, offering exactly what her heart had been starving for. "People will talk," she whispered. "They always do," Colter said with a crooked smile. "The real question is, do we care more for their chatter than our own happiness?" Framed that way, the answer seemed plain. "I would like that, Colter, to see where this leads." The joy that lit his face made her chest ache. He lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Then tomorrow evening I'll call on you proper. Supper at the hotel." "I'd like that," Ruby replied, though duty tugged at her. "But for now I've lessons to prepare." "Of course." Colter let her hands slip free slowly. "Until tomorrow, Miss Quinn." Ruby watched him walk away, her heart a storm of excitement and unease. She was stepping into unknown country, not just with Colter Hayes, but with the fragile, heady dream of a life that held more than the schoolhouse. The weeks that followed shifted everything. True to his word, Colter began courting her openly, sitting beside her in church, sharing meals at the hotel, bringing small tokens that showed he knew her heart, a rare folio for her school papers, wildflowers in a hand-carved vase. The town whispered, of course surprised, at the pairing of the refined teacher and the rugged rancher. But most folks smiled when they saw them together. Yet all the whispers were outweighed by genuine well-wishes, especially from Ruby's pupils and their kin. One afternoon, after lessons, Josie May remarked as Colter waited outside to escort Ruby home, "You make Mr. Hayes smile more." "Miss Quinn, Pa says he used to be the sternest man in the whole territory." October gave way to November, bringing the first snowfall and plans for the Thanksgiving gathering. Ruby threw herself into preparing a school pageant and helping with the town's community feast. One crisp Saturday morning, Colter arrived at the schoolhouse with his wagon. "Bundle up," he said when Ruby opened the door. "I've got something to show you." Curiosity lit her eyes as she pulled on her warmest coat gloves and bonnet. The sky was a clear, hard blue, the earth dusted with snow. "Where are we headed?" she asked, as Colter tucked a heavy blanket over her knees. "It's a surprise," he answered, a hint of mischief in his smile. "Trust me." Always, Ruby replied, and realized she meant it with her whole heart. They drove an hour through pine forest and open meadow before topping a hill that looked down on a valley below. In its center stood a half-built house, framed walls rising from a solid stone foundation. "What is this place?" Ruby asked, wonder in her voice. "My new ranch," Colter said, watching her reaction closely. "I've owned this land for years, but never worked it. Better water here, richer soil. Time I made something of it." He helped her down and led her toward the site where men worked steadily, despite the cold, the ring of hammers and saws sharp in the air. "It's going to be beautiful," Ruby breathed, taking in the sweep of mountains to the west and the broad plains to the east. "By spring it'll be finished," Colter said, nerves rare in his voice. "I was hoping—" He trailed off, then took her hands in his. "Hoping for your opinion. My opinion." "Why should that matter?" He drew a breath, steadying himself. "Because I want it to be your home too, Ruby." Her heart slammed in her chest. "Colter." He dropped to one knee in the snow, still holding her hands. "I know it's soon. I know there are reasons you might say no. But I love you, Ruby Quinn. I've loved you since you aimed that Remington at me on the road to Silver Creek." A laugh slipped out, half joy and half disbelief. "That's hardly romantic." "It was to me," Colter said with a smile that reached his eyes. "That was the moment I knew you were different. Stronger, braver, more determined than anyone I'd ever met." His tone grew solemn. "I'm not asking you to give up teaching. We'll find a way, rides into town or rooms you can keep during the week. Whatever it takes." Ruby's throat tightened at his understanding. "You've thought this through. Every detail," he admitted. "But the only one that matters is your answer. Will you marry me?" Ruby glanced from the rising walls of the house back to the man kneeling before her, the man who had shown her only respect, admiration, and love since that first fateful meeting. The answer came easily. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Colter Hayes." The joy on his face nearly undid her. He rose swiftly, sweeping her into his arms and kissing her until the cold, the workers, the whole world fell away. When at last they parted, Colter reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside lay a sapphire ring encircled by tiny diamonds. "It was my grandmother Bertie McGraw's," he said, as he slid it onto her finger. "The blue reminded me of your eyes the day I first saw you." Ruby admired the ring, then teased softly, "The day I threatened to shoot you." "Exactly," he said with a grin. "Most beautiful sight I ever saw." They spent the morning touring the site, Colter pointing out features he'd designed with her in mind, large windows to welcome sunlight shelves built into the walls for her books, even a schoolroom where she could teach children from the outlying ranches. "You really have thought of everything," Ruby said in awe. "I wanted it to be perfect," Colter admitted. "A place where you could be both Mrs. Hayes and Miss Quinn, the teacher." On the ride back, they talked of when to wed, how to balance Ruby's teaching with ranch life, and whom to tell first. "Once folks see that ring, the news will spread like wildfire," Colter pointed out as they neared town. "Then let's tell Harlan Pike first," Ruby suggested. "As courtesy, he did hire me." Colter agreed, and they went straight to the mayor's home. The portly official beamed when he heard sending straight away for his wife. "This calls for a celebration," he declared. "Silver Creek's finest teacher and our most prosperous rancher. What a match!" By evening, word had traveled the length of town. Shopkeepers and parents alike congratulated them. Even young Tommy Lee, usually too shy for sentiment, muttered good wishes outside the store. That night, as Colter walked Ruby back to the schoolhouse under a sky thick with stars, he asked, "Are you happy?" "Completely," she said, touching his cheek. "And you?" "No second thoughts. Only that spring feels too far away," he confessed. "I don't want to wait that long to marry you." Ruby laughed softly. "Patience is a virtue, Mr. Hayes." "Not one of mine, Miss Quinn," he replied, pulling her close. His kiss under the moonlight promised a lifetime of fire and devotion. Winter clamped down on Silver Creek with a fierceness that tested every soul. Snow piled high against the buildings, and travel grew near impossible, cutting down Colter's trips into town and slowing the work on the new ranch. Still, Ruby and Colter managed to steal time for planning, she sketching out ideas for the home's interior, while he braved the cold to guide the builders whenever the weather broke. December brought thoughts of Christmas. Ruby poured herself into the school pageant, training children on their lines and piecing together costumes with the help of town mothers. By the night of the performance, the schoolhouse was transformed. Evergreens hung along the walls, candles cast a golden glow, and benches crowded with neighbors filled the room. Ruby stood at the back, pride swelling as her students played the nativity with surprising grace. Partway through, Colter slipped in snow, clinging to his coat. He leaned close, his arm wrapping around her waist. "They're wonderful," he whispered. "They've worked so hard," Ruby replied, easing against him. Even little Thomas Jenkins remembered his lines, and he trembled at the thought of speaking. After the play, as townsfolk congratulated the children and shared refreshments from the hotel, Colter drew Ruby aside. "I've something for you," he said, producing a package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red ribbon. Ruby untied it carefully to find a fine leather journal, her initials stamped in gold on the cover. "It's beautiful," she murmured, her fingers brushing the craftsmanship. "Open it," Colter urged. Inside, in his strong hand, he had written, "For Ruby Quinn Hayes, to record our journey together with all my love, Colter." Ruby's throat tightened. "It's perfect. Thank you. I thought you might want to mark down the story of our home, our wedding, all the firsts to come." "I will," Ruby promised, rising on her toes to press a soft kiss to his lips. Tonight, Christmas Day, found Ruby at the Hayes Ranch, where Cora Bell laid out a feast fit for half the valley. Once reserved, the housekeeper now fussed over Ruby with motherly affection's comfort. Ruby cherished having lost Martha Jo years ago. Later, before the fire, Colter surprised her with a delicate gold locket holding tiny portraits of them both. "So you'll always carry me near," he said, fastening it around her neck. Ruby's gift was practical, a saddlebag crafted of strong leather lined to keep papers and supplies dry and stamped with the Hayes brand. For a man always on the move, she teased. "Though I pray once we're wed, you'll stay put a little more." With you waiting at home, Colter laughed, pulling her close. "Not even wild horses could drag me away." January storms struck hard, cutting off outlying ranches and shuttering the school for weeks. Ruby used the time to finish wedding plans and pack for her move to Colter's ranch. Their wedding was set for the first Saturday in April, when the thaw would ease travel for kin from neighboring towns. From Denver, Ruby had ordered an ivory satin gown trimmed in lace, elegant yet simple enough for future special occasions. As winter loosened its grip, her excitement grew. The council agreed she would keep teaching through the spring, riding in from the ranch each day once married. By March, Green returned to the valley. Ruby and Colter rode out often to the new ranch, watching it take its final shape, a proud two-story home of stone and timber, at once strong and welcoming. "It's perfect," Ruby declared one sunny afternoon, running her hand along the new woodwork. Almost Colter said, his eyes steady on her. "It only needs you to make it a home. Their wedding morning dawned clear, and mild wildflowers spotting the hills, birds calling from fresh-leafed trees, Ruby dressed in the schoolhouse June belle, and Josie May fluttering around her like kin. "You look beautiful, Miss Quinn," Josie breathed as Ruby slipped into the satin gown, her hair woven with white blossoms. Soon to be Mrs. Hayes. June Bell reminded her daughter with a proud smile, "Though I expect half the children will still call her Miss Quinn." Ruby laughed, smoothing her skirt. "I'll answer to either, as long as I don't stumble walking down the aisle." The church had been dressed in ribbons and flowers by her students and their mothers. Every pew was filled proof of how deeply both bride and groom had come to belong. Colter stood at the altar in a new black suit, his expression a blend of awe and joy, as Ruby walked toward him on Harlan Pike's arm, the mayor having offered to stand in for Ezekiel Boone. The ceremony was plain, but heartfelt, the kind of service that bound two lives not only to each other, but to the very heart of the town. When the minister declared them husband and wife, Colter's kiss was both tender and claiming, drawing cheers from every corner of the church. Ruby found herself laughing as they turned together to face their neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Colter Hayes. The celebration spilled over to the hotel, where tables bent under the weight of food brought by every family in Silver Creek. There was dancing and toasting, yarn spinning, and heartfelt blessings that lasted late into the night. When at last the revelry faded, Colter guided Ruby to the carriage, waiting to take them to their new home. They had chosen to spend their wedding night beneath the roof of the newly built house, though a few furnishings had yet to arrive. "Already, Mrs. Hayes?" Colter asked, lifting her hand. "Ready, Mr. Hayes?" Ruby answered, her heart brimming near to bursting. The ride to the ranch passed in a blur of stolen kisses and whispered dreams for the life ahead. When they arrived, Ruby gasped. The house glowed with lantern light, every window lit against the deepening dusk. "Who did all this?" she asked, as Colter helped her down. "Cora Bell and a couple of the hands," he explained. "Wanted it right for us tonight." Before she could say more, he swept her into his arms and carried her across the threshold. Inside, warmth and welcome awaited a fire blazing in the hearth, fresh flowers on the tables, and a supper laid out simple but elegant. "Welcome home, my love," Colter murmured, setting her gently on her feet, though his arms refused to let her go. Ruby gazed up at the man who had altered her life so completely in just months. "I love you, Colter Hayes," she whispered. "More than I ever thought I could." His answering kiss spoke everything deep, passionate, and full of promise. Later in their new bed, Ruby curled against him, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, as moonlight spilled silver across the room. "Happy?" he asked, his fingers drawing idle circles on her bare shoulder. "Completely," Ruby breathed, pressing a kiss to his chest. "Though I was thinking of what you said when you proposed." "Which part?" he teased. "About knowing I was different from the start. About me not being like other women." Colter chuckled low in his chest. "You did point a gun at me the first time we met. A man don't forget that." Ruby propped herself on an elbow, her eyes searching his. "Is that truly why you wanted me? Because I was different?" His expression grew earnest as he tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I wanted you because you are exactly who you are meant to be. Strong, stubborn, compassionate, sharp as a tack. You never pretended to be less, never apologized for what you believed. That kind of honesty is rare, Ruby. It's what I fell in love with." Her throat tightened. "And I fell in love with your kindness, the way you look after this land, your people, even strangers broken down on the road. You never hesitate to give." He kissed the crown of her head. "We make a fine pair, then." "The best," she agreed, softly closing her eyes in contentment. The years that followed brought both hardship and joy. Ruby continued teaching, splitting her days between the town schoolhouse and the smaller classroom Colter had built on their ranch for children who couldn't make the daily ride into Silver Creek. Word of her devotion spread across the territory, and she turned down offers from larger towns determined to stay where her work mattered most. Colter expanded the ranch, bringing in new breeding stock and trying methods that soon influenced others across Montana territory. His counsel was sought in matters from water rights to politics, and he served 2 terms in the territorial legislature. Their family grew with the birth of their daughter Daisy June in the spring of 1874, followed by twin sons Luke Rourke and Clay Boone 2 years later. Ruby kept her promise to fill journal after journal with the story of their lives, their triumphs, their struggles, and the everyday moments that gave them meaning. Silver Creek itself prospered and grew. The school expanded from 1 teacher to 3, and the lending library Ruby had dreamed into existence became a reality, housed in its own building by the schoolhouse. On their 10th anniversary, Colter surprised Ruby with a trip east to Boston. Together, they walked the streets of her childhood, and their children met the family she still had back there. One afternoon, strolling through the public garden, Colter asked, "You ever miss it? The city, the Polish, the culture?" Ruby considered watching their children chase squirrels along the paths. "Sometimes I miss pieces of it," Ruby admitted. "The great libraries, the concerts, the endless talk of ideas. But I've never once regretted the path I chose. Silver Creek, our ranch that's home in a way Boston never was." The relief on Colter's face was plain. "I used to worry, especially in those first years, that one morning you'd wake up and feel you'd given up too much." Ruby stopped walking and turned to face him. "Colter Hayes, I've given up nothing. I've gained everything worth having: purpose, community, family, love." She nodded toward their children, scattering breadcrumbs to ducks at the edge of the pond. "Look at them. Look at what we've built together. How could I ever regret that his answer was a kiss, bold and unashamed, right there in the Boston public garden among finely dressed strangers who paused to stare. That kiss told her everything about where his heart rested. When they returned west, their appreciation for Montana burned brighter than ever. The children, though, dazzled by the city, at first laughed with joy to be back among the wide skies and open ground of the ranch. "I love it here," Daisy, June declared as they topped the ridge that revealed their valley home. "I'm going to live here forever." Ruby and Colter exchanged a knowing smile. Their strong-willed daughter might change her mind a dozen times before grown, but her words carried truth. The ranch was their legacy, a gift of place and belonging. As their 15th anniversary drew near, Silver Creek readied for its first great territorial fair, a grand celebration of farming trade and community spirit that drew folks from far and wide. Ruby, now head of the school board as well as a teacher, oversaw the education exhibits, while Colter organized the livestock contests. The night before the fair, they stood side by side on their porch, gazing out over the land that had flourished under their care. The children slept inside the house, hushed, except for cattle lowing in the distance and the wind whispering through tall pines. "Did you ever picture this?" Ruby asked, leaning into Colter's steady hold. He chuckled, tightening his arms around her. "That day I found you cussing at a broken wheel on the road to Silver Creek, I imagined a lot of things, but none of them came close to this." Ruby turned, studying his face. Older now, streaks of silver threading his dark hair, laugh lines carved by years of joy and hardship. Yet still so handsome, still the man who could make her pulse quicken with a single glance. "I'm not like other women," she whispered, echoing the words she'd once spoken long ago. Colter smiled, memory sparking in his eyes. He finished the vow they had begun that very first day. That's why I want you. That's why I'll always want you. Their kiss under the rising Montana moon was deeper than ever proof of the life they had forged together, and of the road still ahead full of promise. Ruby Hayes silently thanked whatever fate had led her to that dusty trail years ago, where a broken wheel and a chance meeting had set her on a course she could never have imagined. She had sought purpose and freedom. She had found both and more. She had found a love story greater than any dream, one that continued to unfold with each sunrise over the wild, untamed land they proudly called home. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West, stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.